The next presentation is on Georgia DOT Pavement Preservation Interactive Tool, and the speaker is Sam Wheeler with Georgia DOT. Please, let's welcome Sam.
So back in West Virginia, when we last met, we kind of let the cat out of the bag on this tool. And some of you are going to have seen this before, and of course Ryan kind of glossed over it yesterday, but we felt it was important enough to bring it back out because 2 years ago it was not publicly available. But thankfully we had a lot of feedback from having shown it to everyone, so I had some help of a couple of gentlemen that I'd like to recognize right quick. Before I retired and went with Arcadis and came back, we were working to bring this tool from the platform where it was hosted by Georgia Tech, which had a limited amount of server space for the whole nation to be able to look at it, and we're trying to get it over to the GDOT side where we could actually host it publicly. And Rodney Way, if you would please just stand up, I'd like to recognize you for being the liaison that actually made that happen with GDOT IT. And there's another gentleman here, haven't spotted him in the crowd yet, but he was actually helped to develop it while he was a PhD student at Georgia Tech. And Sibi, are you here? Sibi Pranav? If you would stand up and be recognized. These two gentlemen helped us get it to where it's at today. We felt it was important enough to kind of roll it back out one more time so that you can actually have the link and use the tool. Before we dive off into it, I just want to take a moment to talk about a little bit of history about why we even have it, why there was a thought behind creating it. And I don't know if Erne is in the room or not, but I certainly want to give her credit because it was her idea to try to put something together to help a training effort, because as we heard from our panel of state representatives yesterday, everybody's pretty much facing the same problems with turnover and experience and whatnot, but there's a reason for why a lot of people do not know about pavement preservation. And I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit with all of you, and it's going to sound probably very familiar to you. So prior to the 1990s, GDOT had a lot of internal maintenance forces that utilized pavement preservation. We did a lot of chip seals, strip seals, and wheel paths, crack sealing. They even had a fleet of slurry seal trucks, which they were auctioned off several years later, and the slurry beds were taken off and turned into dump trucks for local governments. And actually, the town I live in has about 3 or 4 of them. Why did it change? That's the thing, is, we're using something that we obviously know works. Why did we stop? And what were the ramifications of that tapering off and stopping? Well, some in the room are probably old enough to remember a term called oil embargo, which was something that occurred around the 1970s. Shortages were happening, and it was creating issues for the industry, having enough money, having enough resources to pave and whatnot. And that caused something to occur that directly affected pavement preservation, in my opinion. There was a man named Bill Swisher. He was the owner of then CMI Terex company, where the first roto mill was created and introduced into the market. So moving from the 70s, the idea was, shortage of materials, we need to try to recycle. So that brought about that technology where crews used to go out and manually remove failed sections and replace them, or use a lot of preservation on a more regular schedule to keep the roads in better shape. Now we have this machine that can come in and take out just little sliver sections along, and then that blossomed into, we can mill all these curb sections out. So then we start producing these mountains of wrap that start getting reintroduced back into mixes, and that's a whole nother topic we could talk about. But it just became easy on maintenance departments that could afford it to use that technology for maintenance rather than sticking with a lot of their slurry seals and things like that. Then we step forward into the 1980s, and many of us here remember the change in the economic times in our country, and things started to take off. So now we have this neat technology with this milling machine. So we just kind of morphed over into less preservation and more mill and replace. And so it just, didn't happen overnight, but it had a direct effect on using preservation. Now, I think Heath it was that said yesterday he had only, did you do one project or no project in your time? Is he still here? You did one. I did one in 30 years with GDOT, and it wasn't even on a state highway. It was actually a local road. And it was a double chip seal, and some of it's, 30 years later, still laying there, and we're driving on it today. And it receives snow and ice, but it just goes, it's a testament to how well the treatments are if they're done correctly. But what happened within Georgia, and it may have happened within your states as well, is this change in how business was done, it actually caused some of our contractors in certain regions just to close up shop. They just stopped. So by all this stuff happening, the less programming of the type of work that used preservation treatments, we just kind of went through a phase of a generation of employees that never saw it, didn't know anything about it. And here we are in the 2000s and trying to reintroduce it back into our planning to maintain a system that has obviously grown in lane miles and funding not necessarily keeping up with the construction and the increase in all of this. So, we realized, I've been with there 30 years and I did one chip seal job, never did a micro, okay? Didn't know about this stuff, had specifications, but we didn't use it, and we didn't have contractors using it, so you just have this lack of knowledge. So RNA was like, we need to put together a focus group and try to come up with a way to introduce training back to our construction people, into the industry, and just really make it available for anybody, which is why this tool was born. So we sat down with a group of individuals across Georgia. They were GDOT individuals that had some background in preservation technology. And our first idea was, well, let's put together like a flip chart, and they can have it in their truck and carry it with them, and it'll be based on a matrix. You match up problem with solution, and it will tell you, yes, it's good, no, move on to the next treatment. And, one day we're in conversation with Dr. Sy over at Georgia Tech, and the next thing you know, they're like, hey, we can help you with that. We can make this 21st century. We can make this pocket available, not a flip chart, but on the phone, which, the rectangle of knowledge knows everything and everyone loves to use it. And so with CB and his group, PhD's group help, they developed a tool for us, and we showed it to you back in Charleston. So now we actually have this available on the external GDOT website, so anybody can get to it and use it. It's a great application, and we're starting to push it out to our districts and trainings, getting people used to using it, and I think it's going to be a real good tool. And like Ryan showed you yesterday, this is the interface of it when you finally get to it on the web page. And there's the web address. You'll be able to have this presentation so you can access that. But I've made a quick link right here so we can kind of dive in. So if you use that address that was in that slide, you'll be able to pull this up on GDOT's external website. If you're a local government and you don't necessarily have scores or anything to plug into it, it's not the end of the world. If you have any type of pavement knowledge and you know that you have a pavement condition that exists that you could actually apply a preservation treatment to, you could navigate through this and get some idea. It's not going to pinpoint exactly what you should do to this road. It's going to give you choices. And choices are based on the condition of the asset and the parameters of it. Is it in a curb section? Is it in a rural section? So, those of us that have been learning about preservation, we know what treatments work where and which ones you steer away from. But let's just take a moment to look at an asphalt treatment. So again, I think Ryan pointed it out yesterday, it was created using language of our old COPACES system, and we haven't officially named it our new automated system. So what we started out with is what Tech took and built this for us. So we've got to make an edit on that. Not going to be a big issue. But as we all know, if we have a PACES rating below 75%, preservation is not what you're looking for. You're looking for something there above. So it's just an obvious yes, no. Is it above 75? Sure it is. And as Ryan pointed out with some of the mapping tools yesterday that he was showing you, we have a predominantly strong distress of block cracking in our state, which we could go back and talk about that milling issue and all that rap, but I'm not going to get on that. So I'm going to pick block cracking since that's the main one that we see most of the time on the distress, and I'm going to just go with level 2. So our distress collection dictionary, we had to modify it when we changed and went from boots on the ground to an automated system. So we now have 3 severity levels rather than having 4 that we used to carry on certain distresses. And that was something that we had to modify with the industry that does the data collection for us. So we're going to say our block cracking, middle of the road. You know, it's not severe enough to go to rehab, but it's probably, you know, been laying out there 4 or 5 years and getting a lot of environmental stress. You know, and we'll just go with a major critical route, something that's really carrying a lot of traffic. We definitely don't want to use the wrong treatment in a metro area. It's not conducive necessarily to do a chip seal there if you're not going to cape it with something, but well, let's just see what the program tells us. And I'm just going to stick with maybe 7% trucks. This is stuff that you can actually probably find in your own databases to let you know specifically on a certain route, that type of information. And we'll tell it to select a treatment. Roll it up here. And so it's giving this option of crack sealing, chip sealing, hot in place recycling, cold in place recycling, scrub seals, or SSI. SSI is our interlayer category, where that prior to resurfacing a route with like an inch and a half overlay, we would either have single surface treatment interlayer put down first, or a new invention that has come out of the hot mix industry in our state called OGI, which is an open graded interlayer. Those are the choices that you would get to mediate this block cracking issue that you've told this system that you have. So does that make sense to everyone? Nodding heads here and there, okay. I want to back up and we'll just look at the number of treatments that are in there. We've tried to include the entire toolbox. So we know that's micro milling on the far edge there. But if we wanted to look and dive deep into chip seal, and I think Ryan had this pulled up yesterday, for the novice that's, you know, coming into this new, doesn't necessarily know a lot about pavement preservation, you know, we've tried to make it as simple as possible to look at these different type treatments and understand what they are. Some of this was borrowed from some other sources that may look familiar to you. That was vetted through Georgia Tech to do all that. And it gives you a general understanding of what a chip seal is. You're having questions from a programming end if you're a maintenance, district maintenance manager, and you're trying to look at the routes you have and what your data sheet's telling you from your OCI output, what's a good candidate and what is not. Most of this is just some photographs to, you know, kind of visually give you an idea. And, you know, like this one, why is that a bad candidate? Anybody want to take a stab at that? A chip seal at that location. Does anything stand out about that? Not necessarily that. That would happen there. I do see what you're seeing. I see a little bit. Right. But more importantly, traffic signal, where you definitely know there's going to be stopping. This is the same intersection. Okay, just looking at it from a different angle. We've made a couple of mistakes, to be honest, with some of our reintroduction of chip seal preservation treatments. And it was just something that, honestly, it was caught because of lack of knowledge. The inspector, even the contractor, was not aware that our specification prohibits chip seals through intersections. Those should actually have an asphalt overlay to prevent the rutting, to prevent the slippage, to prevent the bleeding issues that you would have in places like that. So, you know, we may need to go back and edit this and provide a little more bullet point as to why it's really a bad situation, to fully describe that. And this may seem a little excessive in this photograph here, but trust me, this is not a pavement that has a load issue. This is just very, very old asphalt. And Mark, you might actually recognize that asphalt. It's not in Tennessee, but it was produced in Tennessee because it's right at the Georgia-Tennessee line in a Georgia town. Some of that, I believe it was C-mix, that river stone that you guys produce mix out of. And it was just, it's been there forever, just oxidized. So, we would recommend a scrub seal with a cape over the top of this. It's a very low volume road, very, very small little town that you could actually treat that with. Another view of it right there. So that's to help people kind of have a visual understanding. A little talk about the materials that's going to be used in it. Then in the construction tab, you have a lot of data in here to read on to figure out how you're going to do this, a treatment. Again, it borrows some photographs and things from probably sources you've saw before. We've included some videos in here. I don't think the sound's on this one. I'll play that one for you. This was actually a GDOT crew, one of our maintenance crews that still uses their chip spreader. And by the way, we still have chip spreaders in our inventory of equipment across the state. Most every district still has theirs. District 1 up in northeast Georgia. This is a route right near the highest point in Georgia, which is called Brasstown Bald, State Route 180. And that crew has a very experienced manager that used to run some of the old GDOT asphalt plants. Yes, we had our own plants back in the day. And Mr. Carlin is very passionate about pavement preservation, and he wanted to teach his crews how to do scrub seals. So he picks some low volume roads and does treatments with scrub, and he levels that on the same day process. And then they generally come back either later in that season or the following year, and they will put an 1.5-inch ride course of hot mix on top of it. And so far from the data that we're collecting and looking at the numbers, these are holding up very well. Again, they're low priority routes and they do not have a lot of truck traffic on it, but he's getting a lot of bang for his buck using chip seals on those roads. And we've had other districts use them through the ITB process. I'll just give you a quick glance there of a GDOT distributor pulling that broom. The same project, just videos are kind of one above the other. But anyway, you can keep scrolling through this and you can find information about the other aspects of the chip seal process. And these are some really old videos. I'm not going to play them because they're long, but I'm sure most of you in here that have probably saw them before from your own state agency that may have done a training for you. So they've included those in there. So there's a lot of information here to help educate someone that may or may not know anything about these processes. And we provided a little information about performance, what you should not see more than what you should see. What you should see is something that looks almost like an asphalt highway. If it's done properly, that's pretty much what it'll turn out like. But these are photographs of the problems with too much stone and corrugation, where you've not got your bar set height, the height set right, or maybe your nozzle angles are not correct, the pressure's not correct on the bar, and it causes that cornrow or streaking problems. Too much or too heavy of a shot, too little of rock, or maybe you had dusty rock supply or something like that, and now you've got some bleeding problem going on because of that, to help teach people what a failed project would look like. And then finally, a link to the GDOT Bible, which would give you all the ins and outs on the specification about chip seals, from materials to the actual construction process and how to pay for it. And then there's some other guide information from material sources at the lab with the QPL, who are your approved sources for your liquid and for your rock and things like that. So it's comprehensive. It gives you everything GDOT related, that you would want to know or need to know to go out and perform any of the treatments. Some of our specifications, admittedly, have been around for a long time and used practically none. So there's a lot less information to provide for those as far as in-house information. Some of the specifications are actually drafts on some of the recycling techniques because they've been tried a time or two for like a pilot project on a short section. But over the years, they've not been fully employed like a lot of states are doing, and my hat is off to Tennessee DOT for all of the preservation work that their western region's been doing. It gives me an easy day's ride up to go look at things. And South Carolina as well. I know you guys have been doing a lot of CSRMB work over there, and I've been and taken a gander at some of that, and there you are. I hope that's all working well for you. From what I observe on my annual visits back to take a look at those treatments, everything seems to be holding up very well. And I like to try to keep an eye on it because standing and watching anybody's process the day of, as long as everything's going great, it always looks great. But the proof is in performance. So it takes annual visits to go back, because I'm not, pulling data from you, of course. But I do like to give a windshield survey of, is it cracking or whatever, distresses are going on. And so far, I think you all have got good things going on in your states with the preservation. And I'm hoping to see that we pick up the pace a little better in GDOT across the state. And some of our districts do. It's kind of spotty as to the ones that are using a lot of different preservation techniques over others. Some are compromised. It's obvious that Metro Atlanta is not a place for many tools of preservation in the toolbox, just based on traffic volume alone. But this is all I have to present. Does anybody have a question, comment, want to argue about anything? I mean, I'm open for anything.
Do all the district crews use their chippers, or is it kind of splotchy from district to district on who actually uses the chip spreader?
The majority of them do. I know one district actually, I think, sold theirs off. What they gave up on a lot of chip sealing several years ago and loaned their spreader out to local governments that were using it, and I think they wore it out, to be honest. And they no longer have one. District 7 is Metro Atlanta, and it's got a few rural suburbs to it, but it's really just not conducive in that district to use chips without cape seal, and it just doesn't happen there. It's mostly a mill and fill district. This district that you are in today, if I'm not mistaken, you still use it, don't you, Barry? Don't they still use chip down here for some maintenance operations? And I know some of the other districts do as well. District 2, which is to the northeast of us up around Augusta, Georgia, still uses theirs on and off. And I think District 4, am I correct, Cliff? Do you guys still do a little bit of strip sealing or something with yours? Yeah, some, yeah. A lot of it that's done is done contracted.
Point out, yeah, we're not doing any chips and scrubs in downtown Nashville, but according to Peshkin's photos, LA County is not scared at all.
Well, I guess it depends on your climate.
Thanks, Sam. Let's give him a hand of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.